Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you joining us from different parts of the globe. On behalf of the Indian Women's Association, our new president, Dr. Tehseen Khan, our new vice president, Mrs. Shireen Kanchwala, and all our members, I'm very pleased to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. Our event today is being held under the patronage of the ambassador's wife, the ambassador of India to Kuwait, Mrs. Joyce Sibi. Unfortunately, due to unavoidable circumstances, she couldn't be with us today, but she sends her best wishes. Our webinar today, Financial Literacy and Legal Guidance, is brought to you in collaboration with the Gulf Bank and supported by the Landmark Group. It is the first in a series of interesting topics we intend to cover in the months to come. It's all about women empowerment. IWA empowers women. We will not only be bringing you interesting topics and interesting speakers, but we will also be answering your questions, any doubts you have in your mind, any questions that you have, any queries that you'd like to raise. So we ask you to hold on till the end of our webinar today for any questions that you may have once our speakers are done. And now I'm going to move the spotlight over to my fellow member of the Indian Women's Association, Sangeeta.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sangeeta, a member of Indian Women's Association. This is not just my story. It is the story of hundreds of women, some of whom we know and some of whom we don't. I'm sure for the many of you who have tuned in, the story could be yours. And for sure, some of your stories will be more challenging than the others. I feel that we live life sometimes like it is going to be a straight line from one day to the other. But life is not like that. A spouse can fall seriously ill, the day can turn, and our life turns with it. When we hear of stories of spouses who fell seriously ill, or of spouses who did not make it, and how their wives had to battle through the legal and financial quagmire, and the challenges and difficulties they faced. We listen to these stories, but we don't expect that the story will be ours someday. As educated, aware women, we pride ourselves on our decision-making skills and on our planning. We know perfectly well, right, how to plan for a big dinner, how to plan for a holiday. We plan for our family, for our children, a wedding, almost to perfection. What about any financial or legal planning? In some of our minds, at least, isn't this a man's job? When the spouse is seriously ill, a lot can go wrong. And we are scarcely prepared for such a day. The legal and financial institutions you may then have to visit in that situation, they may want to help you, but they view you because you are in the thick of this situation. They may view you as with some suspicion and something of a problem. When my husband fell seriously ill, I shocked myself at my own lack of foresight or any planning. See, emotional illnesses, critical illnesses, bring with themselves a fair level of emotional turmoil. And added to that emotional turmoil is a multi-layered management that has to take place. Crucial decisions have to be made, but they have to be made standing outside the ICU. Family has to be counseled and updated. As a working woman, I have to sustain my job and be sincere with it. And surprise, surprise, a lot of important paperwork has to be handled because that was not planned for. Even very simple things which seem simple right now, because we are not in the situation, I could have sworn that I had memorized his bank PIN codes and that I knew a lot. But in the ensuing stress, the first thing I forgot was all of that. I didn't have any access to his email. I had no access to his online banking. And these small problems that we are calling they were just the tip of the iceberg. I thought at that time that had I planned the paperwork at least, without thinking of the whole idea of any financial and legal planning as a boogeyman, I would have stood on much better ground. The lesson I learned was this: all of us have challenges. We can minimize them by mindfully planning because calamities come unplanned. This seminar today is based on this thought. And if any one of us can act upon any take-home message that this evening brings us, then I think Indian Women's Association would be gratified. Which brings us to the first speaker of the day. I would like to introduce Rupa Venkat Krishnan. Rupa is based out of Mumbai, and she is a leading mutual fund distributor known for her simple yet unique approach towards relationship management and portfolio construct. Rupa has been part of the mutual fund industry since 2003 and prides herself on creating high net worth individuals. She believes that the emotions of her clients play a very key deliverable and play a significant role in the managing the emotions of her clients, plays a very significant role in wealth creation in the long term. In her own words, Rupa is fueled by her passion of spreading financial literacy amongst all sections of society, but especially amongst the lesser privileged, as she believes that she can make them financially literate and show them a very simple and disciplined approach to savings and investment. Today, to speak about why do women need financial planning, Rupa, we warmly welcome you to IWA Empowers Women.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Thank you, IWA. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share. It's been an honor to be a part of this discussion. As Sangeeta pointed, it's my passion, saying that it's been my passion to empower women. It's been my passion to do financial literacy across the length and breadth, because that's something which is very less talked about and very less done. I personally feel, saying that Sangeeta said the story about her experience, her journey. I think it's been there with most of the women in this country or across the globe. I think last 18 months of the pandemic has taught us how important it is to put all perspectives, everything to be recorded, everything to be kept, because life is uncertain. Risk, as we talk about, is something which which you are unprepared for. And for that risk, I think what we need is a complete planning. And as women, most of us across what I have experienced, women shy away from finance. But it surprises me to a larger extent, saying that women are actually born talented for financial management, because for centuries together, traditionally, they have managed homes. when you manage home, it is all about managing finance, managing how do you run your home, how do you run your uh, payments of the house that you do, from electricity bill to telephone bills to paying the vendors. I think this is all about finance and management. And I fail to surprise when it comes to managing actual finances. Why are women shying away? It's an inhibitions, I think, which we all have to come out. It's no managing money is no rocket science. It's all the fear is all in the mind, but you all have to come out of that fear and come and accept it and see that how best you can overcome that fear. The best, the thing that I really don't understand, but people say that I don't know how to manage money. But as women, when it comes to when our children are born, when they go to school, we are all finding out, saying that which is the best school, which is the best uh, uh, crèche that I want to leave my child, what is the best doctor available, child specialist who's available. We all talk about it, but I've seldom seen women talk about money. Seldom seen women talk about saying that how do you manage your money? How do we become financially independent? I think we also need to talk about, apart from home, apart from our children, apart, because we all need to be financially independent. I think it's high time we all elevate ourselves in our life and be financially competent, because time has come. If not today, time has come that we all need to initiate, educate ourselves, find how do we improve ourselves into the financial management. That's very, very essential. For the only reason, because look at how the trajectory has changed. You have so many women CEOs in Fortune 500 companies across the globe. There are so many women who have recorded going to colleges and doing PhDs and higher education. More women pursuing entrepreneurship over the globe. Women earning there are more women earning bachelor degrees than men. Why is it that we cannot manage money? I think that's the question we all have to change our trajectory to. And one important thing that we all need to realize is saying that longevity of life is increasing because of the medical advances that are happening, and women live longer than men. I think that is a fact proven, saying that women live longer than men. And it is very clearly said by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention report, which clearly says an average male life expectancy is about 76 years, and women live over 81 years. So we all need to realize, saying that financially we need to be much more prudent to understand, because we have a longevity of life to manage and see that our retirement and our financial position is better. I think it's very well said, saying that you educate a man, you educate an individual. But if you educate a woman, it is about empowering the whole generation together. And I think it's high time that we all educate ourselves on the financial front and see that, how generation and generation we can live better. I think do not fear. Please ask questions. Go to people who are experts in this field. Go and find out who are good people to find, saying that who can help you come out of it, they guide you. You might not be successful in the first time. You might be failure, but you have to try for the first time. We do that even when we cook food at home. Not that when we create some new recipes, it's not going to come the best. When you bake a cake, I'm sure it's going to fail the first time, and you keep on practicing to get the best cake. In the same way, it's all about finance. Even if you try to invest on your own, you would be failure once, twice, but you can't be wrong every time. So you have to try. You have to come out of your fear, and it's very essential, saying that. So don't be afraid. Ask your questions. Take your responsibility to educate yourself on the topic of finance, and that's what I wanted to talk about. But there are a few things which I definitely want to highlight, and where I want to share some screen some presentation that I have made. So it's all about talking about finance and competence that I want to talk about. Okay, what are the key financial? So I had questions when people normally ask me saying that, what are the important things that I need to know if something happens, some crisis happened to me, some crisis happens in my life. I think the first thing that most of you need to know is saying that you need to know your financial advisor, who it is. You need to check with your chartered accountant, who it is, your relationship manager, lawyer, your insurance agents, and your spouse employers. You definitely need to keep these key personal details with you in case of any events that unfortunate events happen in your life. And if you have them, I'm sure that you will be able to put them into perspective, and it will give you a better idea about what's happened, where are your investments, what your status is. And also, what is important to know that what your family should know. I think, as Sangeeta said about passwords of cell phones and your email IDs, it's very important saying that you record it, keep it safe for your family so that the family should know about the financial assets where they are. Uh, the other assets that we have, which is your real estate, your artifacts, your jewelries, your and the ad hoc, your utility bills, because I have seen saying that when a family, when the main person, the the man of the house is no more, I think a lot of payments that we paid through online, credits which happen to the bank accounts, because if you're not having your email IDs, your utility payments goes for a toss. It are very small things, but if you actually put it in a sheet of paper, it's very simple things that you have to put it down to so that your family would know. Eventually, what is important is how do you start it? A lot of people have questions saying that if something happens, how do I start it? I think the first is to contact your financial advisor, chartered accountants, lawyers, your insurance agents, so that you know exactly where you are. Then consolidate all your financial and non-financial assets, put it on a paper, realize what is there. Third is to transfer those assets into your name as per your wills and nomination. Take the help of your financial advisors, assess your needs, require, and then it comes to say that how do I manage that particular money after all is done? So you need to sit with your financial advisor, your chartered accountants, your lawyers to find out what's your cash flow requirement, how to run your house, if there is any debt, how to repay that debt, your short-term, long-term goals, so that your whole portfolio is constructed so that you have a cash flow. There are also questions which keep on coming, saying that how do you? I had a question which this comes from a lot of NRIs saying that what happens in case of transmission of assets in India. So I've just briefed those and written. I'm sure that Jasmine will take it up in details much more later, who's a second speaker, who's an expert on this field. Obviously, in India, the concept of levying taxes on inheritance that does not exist. Inheritance, it was abolished in 1985. It's advisable to write a nominee or a will to ensure that the assets get transferred to the rightful heirs. And it's also advisable to transfer it is advisable to transfer the assets after the demises. Don't keep it a loose end. So it has to be immediately done within 6 to 8 months or a year. With regard to immovable properties and title transfers, it's in case of movable properties, a will is a must. And for self-acquired properties, when deceased leaves a will, the inheritance involved in the process, submission of a death certificate, notarized will, property papers, ownership transfers is all important documents that are needed. Also, there was a question which was asked to me saying that is a will enforced in case of some of the properties are sold and which are not there in the will. The will still is valid document. It is, and the will has all the will can be made in any person's lifetime. There are no restrictions of how many times you can change the will. However, only the last will made before the death is enforceable. After making the will, if any property or assets is sold off, the will remains valid. In one intends to make changes in the registered will without changing the entire will, he can do it through the codicil to the will, and the codicil can be executed in the similar way as the will. What are the important things that most of the people forget? Because in the last 1.5 years, what I've realized is there are small things which people forget to do as a checklist for nominations. So we always advise people to nominate. So you just can note it down and put it across in a notepad and say that it's your savings bank account, your lockers, your fixed deposits, your provident funds, your demat accounts, your mutual funds, insurance, your real estate. It's very essential saying that all of this needs nomination, so that at any point of time, if any unfortunate event happens, saying that it goes to the next kith and kin smoothly. And also the checklist was for will is saying that you also have to write on your will about your gold jewelry, farmland, land, furniture, artifacts, automobiles. Some people have a collection of watches, expensive pens, stamps, silver collections, currencies in cash. Why I'm highlighting is because these are some things which people ignore and say that these are not needed to be done, but it's extremely essential, saying that our experience says you note down in your will. And one last thing which I definitely want to say is, irrespective of your age, you should make your will as soon as possible. I think, as I said it at the beginning, last 18 years of pandemic has taught us life is uncertain and we don't know what will happen the next minute. And it's very, very essential. And most of the people think if I make the will, I'm not going to be there tomorrow. It's not the case. If you have to protect your family, you need to make a will. Women, I just, people who are listening, and especially the women participants, I would definitely say, please take a finance. Don't shy away from finance. Don't run away from finance. The word finance is something which is very scary to most of the women. It's no rocket science. It's just a matter of learning. When the unfortunate event happens, you are in an emotional kind of a space where it becomes very difficult for you to absorb. But I think in the normal course of time, if you are hands-on, then that emotional portion, you are emotionally, but you are able to handle it very, very in a better space. At the end of it, it's your wealth, it's your life, and you all have to be taking all your life into your hand and be confident. And that's what I wanted to share. And I'm sure I've shared certain points. Jasmine will take it over from here and she will highlight it in a much deeper sense. I would just request everyone again, all the women, to be confident. We are. If you don't take it today, I don't think you will have any other time to take your responsibilities. Please elevate your life with financial competence, and that's what I would like to end my talk with. Thank you so much.
Our second speaker for the day is Jasmine Kohina. Jasmine Kohina, a solicitor by profession, is the General Counsel at NBK Capital, the investment arm of the National Bank of Kuwait, the highest rated bank in the Middle East. In her role, Jasmine oversees the company's entire legal function over 4 jurisdictions: Kuwait, Dubai, Egypt, and Turkey. She heads the legal and compliance team and the Anti-Money Laundering Unit. Earlier, Jasmine led the International Law Division for Khalid Al Ayub and Associates, offering expertise to some of the world's largest and most prestigious corporations in North America, Europe, and Asia. Highly recognized in her field, Jasmine is here today to give us some legal guidance on succession planning and inheritance. Jasmine, a very warm welcome to you to IWA Empowers Women.
Thank you, Sangeeta, for the introduction. A very good evening to all the viewers. And thanks, Rupa, for your words of encouragement and motivation to all of us. We have seen that just as wealth creation is important, so is wealth preservation and its distribution. Distribution of wealth during your lifetime is within your control. But to distribute your assets, to make sure that your wealth is in proper hands, to take care of your loved ones after your death is something important, and you need to provide for this during your lifetime. This is your chance, and this brings us to an important topic, which is making of wills. And in cases where your wealth creation journey results in your own business or enterprise, you also need to think of succession planning. The emotional side of making a will is often the toughest, while the actual drafting of its contents is quite straightforward. Very often, I have been approached by people with an inertia that what would my dependents think if I bring up this topic? Yes, this is a sensitive topic, but this is something you need to definitely think about, and think about while the going is good. Because once things are out of your control, there's very little you would be able to address. So today, my main objective is to remove some misconceptions and to walk you through the general principles of making a will, and then touch upon succession planning. So the first question we ask is, why is it necessary to make a will? Or more important, what happens if there is no will? So a will enables you to ensure proper distribution of your assets among those you wish after your death. The will speaks from the date of the death of its maker. In case you don't have a will, your assets will be distributed as per the laws of intestate succession applicable to you at the time of your death. So your personal law will then govern your succession, and this may not be always what you want or what you may have desired. Further, in the absence of a will, your heirs will have to go through certain more cumbersome procedures, appoint lawyers, obtain succession certificates, letters of administration with respect to your estate. This is more time consuming, it is even costly, and you definitely don't want to burden them in this way. So this brings us to the next question: who can make a will? And also, what is the right age to make a will? The law says that anyone who is of sound mind and of the age of majority, capable of disposing of property, can make a will. So basically, as long as you are of sound mind and you are a major, not a minor, you can make a will. Now, I have generally seen that one tends to make wills once they reach middle age or even later. This could be mainly due to the fact that you haven't reached your financial targets. However, there is no fixed time, and the earlier you do it, the better it is, because then you are prepared for any eventuality. So, and moreover, we have seen during this pandemic that life cannot be taken for granted. So it is always advisable to have a will in place and to have all your instructions properly documented. So how to start the process? As Rupa pointed out, it is important to have a checklist in place and to make a list of all that you own, all your belongings, all, not only just your bank accounts, but also any usernames, passwords that you have. It is important that you document all this in a checklist. It does not have to go inside the will, but this particular checklist is what your heirs will need. Because what's the point if you have a proper will, but the legatees do not know where the assets are? They do not know which asset manager to contact. They do not know which bank to contact. They do not know what properties you may have acquired. And all this has to be kept in one place. My advice is also to be as transparent as possible, because generally there is a misconception when people talk about wills. It's like something very secret. And oh, people just hold it very close to their heart. There's no secret, because eventually those who are going to get your properties will need to know about it. So it's best that you let them know about this, and also keep on updating this checklist from time to time, because if you have changed your passwords and you have old passwords mentioned, for example, or you've acquired a different asset from what is mentioned in that list, you need to update it. So I would always suggest that not only do you make a will, but you also update your checklist from time to time and visit it, because the will is more or less permanent. It is done in such a way that it would allow for the distribution of assets at any point in time. But this checklist is something you need to consider and go over. You also need to that times look into nominations that you have made or properties that you own jointly, because what nominations you have made should not conflict with what you have stated in the will. It's best to make things simple and let them be in sync. If you need to change a nomination, change it such that the will also reflects the same legatee as the nominee. Then what properties can you bequeath under a will? See, the basic rule is you can only give what you own. So for example, rented property, you cannot give that to anyone under a will because you don't own it. Also, right to future property. For example, if you are a legatee under the will of your mother, and you know that this would come to you, during the lifetime of your mother, you cannot refer to that property in your will because it doesn't belong to you right now. So these things have to be kept in mind. So only those assets which you own would be reflected into the will in the form of bequests. And also, if you own certain properties today, it's not that with the making of the will, you are locking those properties or assets. Definitely, you can sell those, and that particular bequest will just drop from the will. That's okay. You don't have to cancel or change the will. If you have a house today and you have sold it, that's fine. There's no need then to change it. However, you acquire another property, you can refer to it under a codicil to the will. So there's no, I don't want people to feel, oh, I have to acquire all my assets and then lock them up under my will. The will doesn't lock your assets. The next thing I want to touch upon is the form of a will. There are certain requirements that go into this document. The first one is the appointment of an executor. An executor is like a trustee. He has a fiduciary relationship with the legatees to ensure that the distribution of the assets are done as per the wishes of the testator. Testator is the person who makes the will. Okay, so the role of the executor is very important, because the executor would then have to open a bank account for the estate of the deceased person, file tax returns, and then ensure that all the properties are distributed and get the release. Only then is the role of the executor extinguished. So the first thing is, when you decide on the person, decide on someone you trust, someone who is able to devote that kind of time, and also inform that person, because if by chance that person doesn't want to take on this role and comes to know only after your death, he could just relinquish that role. And then you would have all the legatees in a problem, because you need to have this executor. Sometimes you then have to go to court and the court would appoint the executor. So you don't want all that. So you need to be upfront when you approach that person and say, I'm going to appoint you as an executor. You can appoint more than one person as an executor as well. The next part is going into bequests. What you want to give to whom? Generally, in a will, you would have specific bequests and general bequests, and then the residuary bequest. So the specific bequests would be in nature of specific properties that can be identified or assets that can be identified, such as land or real estate or even jewelry. So you can identify all your jewelry in this particular bank account locker with this bank, or you could identify a particular artwork or an antique or your car, because it all has specific registration numbers which can be reflected in the will. Other form of specific bequests could also be in the nature of giving specific amounts of monies to specific people. So you might want to give a certain portion of your money. So you would say a certain amount is to be given to this particular charity, or to certain charities as the executor may select at that point in time. Or it could be to certain individuals that you name correctly in the will. So these things are all covered under specific bequests. You could also create a life interest in the will. Generally, what is a life interest? It is done to protect those who are your dependents and who are incapable of protecting their own interests. So they could be very old people whom you want to protect. They could be people who are ailing, people who have certain disabilities, who wouldn't be able to take care of their own finances. So you can't give the money to them. You can't give your assets to them because they won't be able to control those. So what do? You create a life interest such that you tell your executor you would have to take some amount, make a corpus, invest that such that a certain fixed monthly amount is paid to that particular person to pay for his day-to-day expenses. So this is a life interest. And then after the life of that person, the corpus goes to certain legatees. So here again, the role of the executor is extended until the life of that person, and he or she has to ensure that these payments go on a monthly basis until the life of that person, and thereafter distributed to the legatees. Of course, then we have what is called general bequests. These are usually your liquid assets, your investments. You do not have to specify that my shares in Reliance or my shares in the National Bank of Kuwait or something, or in Apple. No, you just have, what lawyers usually do is they write of whatsoever nature and wheresoever situated. So this means all your investments in shares, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, fixed deposits, all this cash lying in bank accounts, all this is written in a very general way. This gives you the flexibility to move those assets during your lifetime and to change their form as you deem appropriate and build your wealth along the way. So you can have your will also and continue with your wealth creation path at the same time. And then finally, we have what is called the residuary bequest. The residuary bequest is generally saying, I give the rest and residue of my estate, because you have specific ones, you have this general ones, but there could always be something left out, or there could always be something added later, or there could be certain things at the very micro level, like your cutlery in your house. This is also something that you own and you need to dispose it of, but you're not going to mention all of that. So all that, the residuary bequest could be as micro and as small, or it could be as wide, depending on your estate. And it also, as I said, could include any properties that you will own in the future. So if you acquire this under somebody else's inheritance and it becomes yours later, it can fall under the residuary bequest. Finally, I just like to say, is there a form of a will? Because many times my friends approach me and say, give me a format of a will. Frankly, the law doesn't prescribe any form, but you will have lawyers using their own forms. You will have bankers using their own forms, giving it to their clients. Investment advisors have their own forms just to facilitate. At the end of the day, you need to customize it based on your requirements, based on your wishes. Finally, how do you execute a will? The will is executed by the person in the presence of two witnesses. Two witnesses should be such that they are not legatees under the will. They are not the beneficiaries under the will. This is to ensure that there is no exercise of undue influence or coercion. In case of a very old person making a will or an ailing person, a doctor's certificate is also attached or advisable to attach with the will, just to make sure that the doctor has certified the person to be of sound mind and fit and proper and capable of making a will. And also now this brings us to the next point, which is, can a will be registered? Yes, a will can be registered, but that does not mean that lack of registration would nullify a will. No, the law doesn't say a will has to be registered. A will has to be registered under the Indian Succession Act only if you are creating a public charity. If you're creating a public charity, then yes, you would need to register the will and also survive for a period of 1 year. Beyond that, registration is done as an option, and it is also done as a requirement such that no one else can thereafter effect any wrongdoing. So you register a will. After that, even if you make another will, but you don't register it after 10 years, 20 years, the registered will prevails and not the unregistered one. However, you can still change your will and register the second will if you want. But registration is something people generally shy away from and feel, oh, it's a long drawn out process, so I want to put off making a will. My advice is don't put it off, make your will. And whenever you have the time, please register it also. It's for the benefit of your legatees. Here in Kuwait, we do not have this registration facility. You would have to do it if you are in India. You can do it there, but you won't be able to do it here. In the absence of a registration process, what we generally do is we can have the will attested before the notary public at the Indian embassy in the consular section. This is something which is definitely recommended for Indians who wish to make a will here in Kuwait. Next, I will also touch upon a little bit on wills by Muslims. So as per Muslim law, a Muslim can only give up to 1/3 of his estate under a will. So all this, what we have talked about, yes, would apply to a Muslim, but only with respect to 1/3 of the estate. Although I'm not sort of an authority on Sharia, but what I've been told and what I understand is the philosophy behind this is that charity begins at home. So the 2/3 of the estate devolves as per Sharia on the heirs, whether you like it or not. And the whole rationale is that you cannot give to outsiders if your own kin are left starving. Anyways, this is how it is, and it applies as per Sharia for 2/3. With respect to 1/3, yes, you can make a will. Finally, I'd like to touch upon succession planning. In case you own your own business, it is also essential that you plan ahead of time your successor, because in your business, you have several stakeholders, your clients, your vendors, your employees, and in any such eventuality, if you are not around, you would want to make sure that the business continues in as smooth manner as possible. So here you would have to take into consideration the management aspect as well as the ownership aspect. If you are a founder, definitely you would want the ownership side to devolve upon your own heirs. However, the management need not be so. Sometimes your children may not be interested in running your business. They might be outside the country, and you do not wish to unnecessarily bother them with this. So the management side can devolve around a third party, an outsider, whereas the ownership could still be given under the will. After all, the goodwill you have generated should not go to waste and should be kept within the firm for generations. This is, in a nutshell, what succession planning is all about. Well, that's the end of my speech on wills. I'd like to thank the Indian Women's Association. Thank you all the ladies for the wonderful job that you have done and for inviting me. And I wish you all success and all the very best in all your future seminars on women empowerment. Thank you.
On behalf of Indian Women's Association, I feel privileged to address you all and express our heartfelt gratitude as the first session in the series of IWA Empowers Women comes to an end. We would like to thank our dear patron, Mrs. Joyce Sibi, wife of the Ambassador of India to Kuwait, for always encouraging us and supporting us. Unfortunately, she's not here with us today. We'd like to say a big thank you to our speakers. Our first speaker, Mrs. Rupa Venkatkrishnan, for her powerful message delivered with such sincerity and passion. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your experiences with us. Our second speaker, Mrs. Jasmine Kohina, for stimulating us and presenting the subject with such clarity and also making us realize that this is no rocket science. We just need to put our mindful attention to it. For any idea to culminate into a reality, a combination of things are needed: good intentions, commitment to the cause, and of course, you need supportive partners. So I'd like to say, on behalf of IWA, I'd like to say a big thank you to our partners who believe in our work, in our vision. My sincerest thanks to Gulf Bank, Centrepoint, Indian Business and Professional Council, Intercare General Trading, Alisa Medical Group, Insure and Secure Group, Poonam Bhasin, Limac Insat Kuwait. Last but not the least, our audience, for your time, for your participation. We still have your questions for the speakers, so I'm going to now pass it back to Nita. Thank you again, everyone.
Hello, everyone, and we can see that you've been very active on all the channels. All the comments on Facebook have been very active. We have your questions for our speakers, but before I go on to the Q&A today, I'm just going to very quickly take this opportunity. I mentioned at the beginning of our webinar today that we have new leadership, and I'd just like to take a few seconds to quickly spotlight them. They are the women that lead the Indian Women's Association. They've been behind all our ideas and the whole in IWA Empowers Women concept. So just putting into the spotlight very quickly, Dr. Tehseen Khan, and adding to the spotlight, a very good partner in crime to Tehseen, Mrs. Shireen Kanchwala, our Vice President. Thank you so much, ladies. And now, we're going to go back to both our speakers, and we had some questions given on the comments as well as on our email. So we're going to throw those questions at both our speakers. So let's see what they have to say. We have Rupa back, and we have Jasmine. Okay, so ladies, I hope you're, I'm going to unmute you as we go. So I think, Jasmine, we had a lot of questions for you, and Rupa, I think people were just asking, how much can we invest and when can we invest and how do we go about it? So I think I'm going to start with Jasmine because there's a whole lot of questions around the will. So Jasmine, people want to know things like charges for the will, and will the will be applicable in Kuwait if they create it for foreign assets? Will an Indian will be useful? And will the banks in Kuwait accept it? So these were like general questions. There you go.
Okay. Yes, Nita. Okay, first thing is a will is a will. The will doesn't have any nationality of its own. So you can create a will in India with respect to all your assets in India as well as global assets. So if you have certain assets in Kuwait as well, these could all be included in one will. Okay, so you don't have to have separate wills made. There's no such requirement. And yes, there are no charges for making a will, but generally you would have to pay lawyers' fees and the registration fees if you were to register the will.
Okay, all right. So let's say a will has been made in India. Will it be useful to transfer money into the account of the demise of the account holder if it is from the banks in Kuwait? Like, will the banks in Kuwait also honor a will made in India? I think it goes back to that question.
Yes, if you have a will properly executed, okay, and it is also attested by the Indian embassy here, then you could produce that before a bank here in Kuwait to get the cash transferred from the bank account of the deceased if you are the legatee with respect to that bank account. Okay. So if you show that will, then there might be certain additional procedures like getting the will translated into Arabic if some institutions require that, and then having that also attested and legalized up to the Kuwait embassy, etc. These procedures and nitty-gritties, frankly, only the legal advisors practicing in that would be able to assess, but definitely it is a valid document.
Fantastic. So in line with that, you mentioned that it is the person that is inheriting or the person that is executing the will. So can the executor be another relative, a lawyer, or someone else, someone neutral? Can they use the will?
The executor can also be a legatee. It could be the same person who is going to receive the proceeds. It could be one of those. It could be a neutral third party also as an executor. This depends what you want. Or yes, some people appoint their lawyers. Some people appoint their asset managers as their executors. It depends. It's a personal choice.
All right, another question we had for you was around siblings. So if there is property that is inherited alongside with siblings, so my brothers and sisters, we inherit some property together, can I put that in my will? Is a question someone had.
So once you inherit the property, after that it becomes yours, or that portion, a certain portion of it becomes yours. But if you're just a legatee under that will and you will inherit in the future, no, because that is your right to future property. That cannot form part of your will right now. Because right now it's just a right that exists in the future. What if that person changes his or her mind and removes you from that will? So how can you then put it in your will today? So the basic principle is you can only give what you own.
Got that. And I guess I need to be nice to people who are going to inherit, giving me their property.
From whom you're going to take, yeah.
Right. Rupak, over to you. What about insurance policies in India and in US dollars and bank accounts outside of India? How can we deal with that? This was a question for you.
So the policies that you have in India, I think if some demises happen, you can give a death certificate and you can do a claim on those insurance policies. You just have to come and fill the formalities to fill a form, give the documentation along with the death certificate, the legal heir, in case if there is a nomination in that particular policy, you can claim that with the formalities, and I think the money comes back to the nominee, whoever is the nominee there. And if there is no nominee, then it has to go through the probate that has to be filed in the court as a legal heir and get a probate and get it transferred to whoever is the legal heirs in that to the person who's deceased.
Right. Actually, that was another question that came up for you as well, that in case of an eventuality, what about transfer of shares and mutual funds if there is no nominee? So I think you've answered that question.
Yeah, so you need to go through the process of probate. And I think that probate process is something you need to go to the lawyer accumulate all the assets, assimilate all the assets, and then apply for the probate.
Okay, fantastic. Are there any other questions for our speakers? Your last opportunity? No, not really. Just to let everyone know.
I think, Anita, you just asked me saying that, there is a myth with a lot of people saying that you need large sums of money to invest, right? I don't think you need a large sums of money to invest. It is all about discipline. You always start with small. And it is only that small becomes big over a period of time. And that is basically because, the first exposure to any financial world for us is a banking, right? We first open our bank accounts. And especially when we are growing up and when we start working, I think the first thing comes is tax. When we get our salaries, and at the end of the year, when the accounts department come and says that you have a tax to be paid, then you find which are the tax options that you available so that you get a tax exemption, correct? So you buy an insurance policy because that's the easiest one. Traditionally, we have been buying. But we don't explore. We don't sit and understand the day I start earning, what are the things that I need to look at? What are the parameters that I need to look at when it comes to taxation? What is that I need to do for the future? Because the reality is, all of us have to save for our retirement.
Sure.
All of us have to save for our contingency purpose. So it's about discipline. It's about to sit with somebody and talk about it. And I think we all have to come out of the myth saying that you need large sums of money. No, you only need small sums of money. I think that's very important. When it comes to finance, it's not about small and big. It's about going and finding your options available and when to start. I think that's essential.
I think on this note, Rupa, I know the topic is a little off, on a tangent, but that story you told us, which has become my favorite story, the Didi Wali story. Can you share a little bit very quickly? Tehseen has a question, but we'll come back to that as well, in terms of, how small you can start. Because I think a lot of ladies, and I'm in the same boat, I always shy off with investments and things like this, and you covered it so well that that empowerment is very important. It's not about the amount. So that Didi story would have been really nice to hear.
Yeah. So I talk about money, and I had been to a client's place and I was talking about investments and all. And there was this guy who had come there. He was basically coming to massage. He had come to give massage to the owners there. And he heard me talking about money, everything, investments and all. And then it took me an hour for me to discuss. And when I came out of the building, there was somebody standing and somebody came running behind me and said, Didi, mujhe bhi help kar, mujhe bhi invest karna hai, mujhe bhi help karo na. And I looked at him and I said, theek hai, invest, tumhare paas paise hain, 1,000 rupees hain. So he said, हाँ, 1,000 rupees hain mere ko invest karne ke liye. And that's how I started, because I never wanted to disappoint him saying that he cannot be because he was first of all reluctant to ask me saying that, would you help me, correct? And I said, of course, I'll help you. And that's how his journey started 14, 15 years ago. And he started with 1,000 rupees. Then after 5 months, again, 1,000 rupees. And I remember 8, 9 months later, one day he calls me up on a Sunday and says that, Didi, ek time dene ke liye kitna paisa chahiye? So I said 5,000 rupees. And I remember from that day onwards, every month he used to do overtime of 5,000, 10,000. And he started giving me money to invest. And it's never stopped today. And today he's almost worth 1 crore of rupees, correct, in the last 14 years. And he stays in a very, very small apartment. He's from a very, very, vulnerable society. But today he's been able to reach that level of, the kind of house, the education that he gives to his children. English, his child goes to an English medium school. His child wants to study maybe medical. So I think it's all about small amount of money, and we feel
just planning for the future. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Rupa, but think the questions have started pouring in, so I'm very mindful of the time. Tessin, do you want to go with your question, and then we'll take the audience questions as well?
I just wanted to ask one question. What happens if you have not made a will? What happens to your assets and your property and what in Kuwait and in India? For example, you're not made a will. What does the state take over, or what happens to that?
No, I'd like to take that question. Tessin? It's not that if you don't have a will, doesn't mean that the state will usurp your properties. No, that's not right to say. But definitely your properties would then devolve upon intestate succession. So that means as per the laws of intestate succession, that would apply to you. So if you're a Hindu, the Hindu intestate succession, the Hindu Succession Act would apply. If you are a Christian, likewise. With respect to Muslims, anyways, 2/3 is out of your control. It goes as per Sharia. And this percentage is specified. Whether you have a will or you don't have a will doesn't really come into play. But yes, if you have created a will for 1/3 of your estate, then that will go as per the will. Okay, that's how it is in a nutshell. But it would be wrong to say that the state would just take over the properties. It's just that you would have to go through a much more cumbersome process, apply for succession certificate in the High Court of Judicature where the deceased, was living or was born, and also apply for letters of administration. It's a long drawn out process.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to our 2 last questions, and then just to let our audience know, if you have any more questions, you can just email them to iwaempowerswomen@gmail.com, and we will try our best to redirect them to our speakers and they would answer them. But before that, what happens if an executive is no more? An executive of a will is no more? That was the question. So I don't know. I think that
yes, if the executor, that's why we normally appoint at least 2 people as executors. So if one becomes incapable, the second one would continue. But if you have appointed only one person as an executor, then all the heirs have to jointly appoint another person as an executor. And if they do not sort of agree on that, then they ultimately have to go to court, and the court would then appoint someone as an executor.
Okay, all right.
And this is a very technical question, Neeta. So I think, a lawyer who is handling testamentary successions would be the best person to answer.
Right. So they should get some legal advice on that.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. And very interesting question next. Most efficient way to transfer assets and paying less taxes. So.
Do you mean transfer assets during one's lifetime?
The question has just come in as most efficient way to transfer assets. So I'm guessing it is not during one's lifetime. It is probably afterwards. Yes.
Yeah, and see, in India, as Rupa had mentioned in her presentation, there is no estate duty tax now. So the assets are transferred by way of transmission to the heirs. That's the legal word. They're not transfer, it's transmission to the heirs, and they do not have to pay taxes. However, if you have assets in the UK or in the US or in some other foreign jurisdiction, yes, the heirs would have to bear the estate duty tax. In the US, you have estate duty taxes. In the UK, so proper tax planning also needs to be considered.
Got that. Okay, thank you. And I guess this is going to be our last question. Is it advisable to invest in mutual funds or safely put it into a fixed deposit? I guess that goes to Rupa.
So the first premise of investing is all about saying that your money has to grow above inflation, correct? So if you look at the fixed deposit rates across, it will always be at the level of inflation. So if you're only investing in fixed deposit, which means your money is not growing above inflation, so which means you are actually getting the value of your money keeps on growing, your expenses keep on going up, right? So it's very essential to have a mix of both, so that your money, you have fixed income and your money also grows over a period of time. So it's advisable to have a mix of both.
Mix of both. Okay, great. Well, thank you, ladies, so much, Rupa and Jasmine. It was wonderful chatting with you. I wish we could go on and on, but we're very mindful that we are on a tight schedule. I'd just like to remind all our viewers, if you have any more questions, please email them to IWA empowers women@gmail.com. We will also have it posted on our Facebook page, and we will try our best to answer your questions. With that, I'd like to thank our speakers one last time. You guys were a great audience. Thank you for all the questions. And my wonderful IWA team, thank you so much. We hope to bring you many, many more such interesting topics. So watch this space. It will be on Facebook. It will be live. And if you have any topics that you'd like to suggest to us, do bring them up to us and we'll try our best to bring them on for our general and mutual empowerment. So let's all lift each other up. Thank you so much. Goodbye. Stay safe.